To the end of day 38 of the Undercover Policing Inquiry. Bit of an early finish today. Not that surprising given how Tony Waite is, of advanced years and maybe not really doing that well of getting through a long day. So we're back again tomorrow for more of him. But I'm joined by Donal of the Undercover Research Group. Just to recap the things. Unlike so many others of the witnesses that we've heard from the police side, though it's been couched in a probably kind of way from Tony Waite, he's been much more candid than so many of the other witnesses.
No, totally. It's almost like he's got nothing to lose. He's, as you said earlier, he's just letting it out. And something you said earlier really resonated with me. Is like there's no fight in him. It's just like, oh yeah, I guess so. I must be. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with you, but it's like, he does have some recollections enough just to push it through. Say, yeah, he did know, and he's not doing it out of like any real remorse, but he is.
No, not remorse at all.
But he is accepting it as misogynist. I think that was the key thing from this last session. It was put point blank to him by bar. Would you consider your behaviour to be misogynist? And he went, yeah, by today's standards, yes.
He first said, well, I've been married for 60 years, so I can't be that misogynist. But I suppose by today's standards, you know what I mean? There was, the majority of the questions of the last session have related to TBS, Bob Lambert's relationship with Jackie, about the fact that he knew all about the pregnancy, but never even considered finding out if the child had been born or not. And he uses this as kind of a defence. Well, I didn't know if the child had been born. I knew that he'd got someone pregnant, but I didn't know there was a child. Didn't give any consideration to it. Didn't give any consideration whatsoever to the mother. Didn't give any consideration to Bob Lambert's wife, who he knew personally. He doesn't do himself any favours, but he doesn't seem to care at this point in life.
Yeah, I don't think him and Bob Lambert will be sharing Christmas cards. But that was a good point. It's like, the fact that he knew Bob Lambert's wife is just, is how institutionalised this misogyny was. It just wasn't on their thing. And it's really obvious in everything he says. And I think he's a really, really important witness in this sense. It's just like, he doesn't have two fucks to give. So what you're getting is the unadulterated. This is what we felt. But it's like, oh well, it's we had enough to cover our backs, and that was sufficient. They don't really care that much more. It's just that like cold dullness. Well, wasn't going to come and expose us as a unit. It wasn't going to cause us any problems. But he actually says that Bob Lambert is the best ever SDS undercover. The guy who burnt down Debenhams, or attempted to burn down Debenhams, is their best undercover.
I mean, he was really, really, really strong about that. He was saying, that he was like, look, his written product was great. He was levels above everyone else. There was no consideration that he could possibly even be disciplined because he was such a good officer. If he'd been a bad officer, we'd have removed him. I mean, he even said that, like, it was, and then it's put, like, Barr couldn't believe what he was hearing because he asked again a couple of times, is this what you're saying? You're saying that because he was such a good officer, you overlooked his wrongdoing. And basically, I mean, he said it in different sorts of ways, but Tony Waite was like, well, yeah, he was a really good officer, so it was unthinkable for us to remove him from the field.
Yeah. Which is kind of ironic. It's like, we've seen earlier is that Lambert lied through his teeth in all these reports. He attempted to burn down the Debenhams. He set other people up. His own reporting stretches credulity, and where the man just going, this is brilliant, this is amazing. It's like, and his lies just keep carrying him through. The fact they put him forward for a commendation. Nobody's asking questions about, well, actually, the reason he's getting all this good intelligence is he's reporting on himself. He's reporting on his own criminality.
Yeah, I mean, Tony Waite used the example of the commendation as why he was such a good officer. He even said it would be unthinkable to pull him out, but if he'd been a bad officer, we could have removed him. But we couldn't remove Bob Lambert. He was too good. He says that because of his common sense, that there was he only needed minimal supervision. I mean, he really gives him a license to behave exactly as he wants.
Yeah, and unfortunately, but this is just an example of the whole unit, is that they're constantly getting away with it. Lambert took it to extremes that nobody could really have imagined, but, he was happy to do that, and his managers were happy to do that because they were able to sell the unit to their bosses, so they could sit in their nice little cushy jobs, getting all their overtime, getting paid to go out drinking, and this notion that the SDS was the elite of the elite of the elite is like, is the cushiest job of the cushiest unit. It's like, seriously, is this is this what Special Branch is being held up to be? It's not a good look.
No, it's pretty horrific. I mean, Tony Waite's been because as we said, he doesn't seem to care anymore. He's been pretty, open about the reality of the situation. He didn't give any consideration to the women. He didn't give any consideration to the child. Didn't even find out if the child had been born. He talked about, that they would observe Bob Lambert whilst he was on deployment, out at protests and on demonstrations and so forth. It was part of the role of himself and other managers. But he said there was never any conversation about what he was doing with women, whether he might be having more relationships whilst deployed undercover. I mean, let's be clear. I mean, Tony Waite uses some pretty awful language. It's put to him he's a misogynist. He eventually accepts it after saying, "Well, I've been married for 60 years. I can't be that much of a misogynist." But it's very clear that he doesn't. He refers to these as affairs, which is kind of great. But he's like, there was no consideration. We didn't know if anything else happened. Didn't know if the child was born. Just let it happen.
Yeah, and you see this throughout his evidence. It's not just... It's one of those pieces of evidence you have to listen to the whole thing through, and you really just see the inner misogynist coming out. And also, he's not the exception. He's the poster boy. He's the simply the example of what the Metropolitan Police were then and are now. It's like they have this attitude towards all women, and it continues in all aspects of the police, whether you see in the War Boys investigation, whatever. He's no different from any of them. He's just putting on the table for everybody to see the inner misogynist within the Metropolitan Police, of which he is an example. And, it's like, Hannah Arendt's banality of evil in the Nazis. This is the banality of misogyny. They don't see anything that's wrong. It's there, it's every day. They're more interested in protecting their female undercovers, but they don't care about the women in the field. Everything they do, they don't care about Robert Lambert's wife, even though he knows her. This is what a friendship is in this world. Is we'll cover up that you're having an affair, and once they're out of trouble, once they think that it's covered up. We've gotten a plausible excuse. We don't really care anymore. We're not going to follow up. We're not going to do any more investigations. They actually said, Barr was good on this and just going, well, did you do any follows up? And you asked various questions, and it was clear, no. As long as they thought their backs were covered and they could get out and they weren't going to expose their nice little jobs, then that was sufficient. It was what a failure of management. And you had to admit that it was a failure of management because the Metropolitan Police came out and said this was a failure of management. And you kind of gritted his teeth and went, yeah. Which is, complete contrast to HN1 last week. But, there was no way out for him. And it was also obvious that everybody in Special Branch knew because he went off to tell other people in Special Branch, and they all went, yeah, so what? Yeah, pretty much. I think Barr couldn't really believe what he was hearing, and he had to ask the same question again just to get it on the record, that it's like, oh yeah, if he'd been a worse officer, you would have withdrawn him, but he was such a good officer, his written product was so good, even though, as you say, it was all bloody made up, that, he had special dispensation to behave exactly as he pleased, basically. It's outrageous.
As you might be able to notice, we've had a few technical problems with this recording. I had no idea why, but we'll probably call it a day there now. He will be coming back tomorrow, as well as being DCI of the SDS. He went on to a more senior role.
He went on to head up C Squad when oversaw the SDS, so it's because he's getting old. They're not going to call him back for this later investigation, so tomorrow we can expect questions on that later role, and he'll be one of the first managers we hear from those higher positions. There's others like Kraft, also went on to similar ones. So it's not just about what he did at the SDS, it's about what he did with the oversight, dissemination of intelligence. So we'll start getting more of an insight there.
Yeah, as well as a few more years of him as DCI in the SDS unit. I'll do a Twitter Spaces this evening, but we're back again tomorrow, 10 a.m. 15-minute delay again. It's going to be a 15-minute delay for the rest of the hearings of this phase, which it makes it a bit more difficult for me, but hopefully nobody else really notices. Thanks for joining. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, this is why we listen to the managers. Don't underestimate them. I know the undercovers, are very important, but for the managers, they tell us so much about the actual workings of the unit and what was going on behind the scenes. Really important.
Yeah. Thanks for joining, Donal, and see you all again tomorrow. Bye for now.